I am Judith Graves, and I'm with KidLit Cove, and we are a group that promotes authors, illustrators in Atlantic Canada. So anyone from picture books to graphic novels, middle grade fiction, young adult fiction. We cover children's books published in Atlantic Canada. We are from dun, 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 beautiful places like Prince Edward Island, where I'm from. We have authors in Nova Scotia. No one from Newfoundland yet has come on for an interview, and I want someone. New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, right. And today we have a PEI author illustrator, very well known, has won lots of awards, and I'm very excited to have her today, Alma Fullerton. And this is her website. You can check her out. And we're just going to look at some of her books. This is her collection of young adult and middle grade fiction. We'll talk about them when we actually get into the interview, but yes, there's quite a lot of books happening here in Alma's life. And then here are some of her picture books. And specifically today, I do want to talk a little bit about these two, No More Plastic and Pockets Full of Sea Glass, which just came out with Acorn Press, because they're both done in this really cool diorama illustration style. Let's get into our interview with Alma. Hi, Alma.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so I have given you questions in advance, and I'm sure I'm going to go off on tangents, and I hope that you get into some weeds with me. But where do you live is my first question.
We moved last year, almost 2 years ago, to PEI, around the Surrey area in PEI, so the most east coast.
Okay, and so if we're talking PEI, it's like, I love it when people say it's shaped like a smile, and it is. And there are two tips, and there's Surrey on one end and Tignish on the other, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
East Point on one end. Yeah, Surrey's a little lower, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, pretty close. I know because I'm a newbie too, also to PEI. We're come from a ways, but we love it here. Okay, so living in PEI now, and where did you move from?
We moved from the Georgian Bay, Midland, Ontario.
Okay, so a little different. Not so much land anymore. There's lots of sea.
Yes, and lots of sea. We had the we had the water before, but now it's the ocean. So,
Yeah,
and it's all ocean in front of us.
That's excellent. Okay, so second question that I had. Right. In a lot of these books, I'm just going to flash back to, well, I'm just going to, so we can see some of them here. Especially, I think your young adult and middle grade fiction more so. You focus on anxiety. Seems to be a recurring theme. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, there's anxiety in two of them.
Okay.
And that's the Journal of Anxious Izzy Parker and this one, Pockets Full of Sea Glass. Well, I'm an anxious person. I have a dog that helps me with that.
Okay. A therapy dog.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Emotional support.
Yes. Okay.
Dog. Okay. That helps me with that. Moving to PEI actually helped me a lot with that. I'm not as anxious here as I was. So that helps.
That is good.
And also, when I was teaching at the school, I noticed a lot of kids, especially after COVID, were very anxious. And I thought it was important to get books out for these children that have anxiety. They're not alone.
Mm-hmm. So I know the premise behind Pockets Full of Sea Glass. What's the premise behind the other title?
The Journal of Anxious Izzy Parker is about a little girl who moves from Toronto to PEI, and I actually wrote it before I moved to PEI. And she gets a therapy dog.
Oh,
so
really
she actually gets an emotional support dog for her in the book to help her deal with her anxiety.
Okay, excellent. So I'm really sensing a pattern here of write what you know a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's good. I like to say write what you know ish. So you know it's from the heart and you've experienced some of it and then you know you fictionalize it.
yeah.
But that's really good. And Pockets Full of Sea Glass. Can you tell us about that?
It's about a little boy who's anxious and fearful, and he goes to the beach to help him, walk. And I think going into nature is very important to help with anxiety. Any exercise, and the ocean, the sounds of the ocean, just kind of washes it away anyway. So I got the idea actually walking on the beach,
Hmm.
and I wrote the book on the beach. And as I walked, I was thinking the book. So
That's cool. Sea glass, beaches, anxiety, and dogs. So the beach and the ocean are helpful and getting out in nature, but also the help of a companion and animal is really important.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah, there's goats and chickens that help too,
oh yeah.
because it gives them something to do, right?
Hmm.
It takes my mind off whatever's causing the anxiety, and pets are a big help,
Pets are a big help.
even if they're not trained.
Yes,
Yeah.
even if they're domestic critters in a barn that you're hanging out with. Um,
Yeah.
we just had a huge storm in Atlantic Canada and through the Maritimes. And I was really interested when you talked about how now you are getting to your goats. Can you please just tell me that again? It's a
I
great
have to
story.
go over like 6 foot snowbanks to get to the goats. I had to dig out a little bit, and I go right over the gate to because they have a pen, so I have to jump over the gate to get to the goats. Luckily, the door to wasn't blocked because we
Mm,
get wind drifts here
right.
because we're right on the point that we get the wind. So, like the field across the street is bare, but our backyard we have 10-foot drifts
That's so
and
unfair.
then bare spots.
Yeah, and bare
So
spots. Yeah.
yeah, it
Wow.
is. It's strange, but it's life here.
It is. Yeah. And I remember when we were kids, we would jump off of our, and I always told my husband this because we lived in Alberta for a long time, and I lived here when I was a kid, and then I tell my husband stories about PEI and walking along the 6 foot fence and then just jumping into the snow because it was level with the fence pretty much, and he was like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then when we moved here 2 years ago, we had a huge, also big series of storms, and the kids across the street, sure enough, are like going to their fence and then diving down into the snow. And he was like, "Okay, now I get it."
Yeah, with this one, I had to jump up though.
Right? Yes, you had to climb up. Gee.
Had to climb up and walk over and then jump down.
So I can see how they're helpful and relaxing animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, so the other thing I would like to talk about is your writing process. So you do illustration, diorama, and traditional art too.
Mhm.
And the diorama process is uses photography, but I just want to talk a little bit about your writing process because you see you do it all, right? So can you talk about what it's like to be a writer and all of these things?
Well, I'm dyslexic too, so along with the anxiety and dyslexia and ADHD, it really takes me a lot to focus. I really, really, it being pulled out of that writing mind, I would have to go back and start over, like from the beginning. So novels are a little. They take sometimes they take a long time, and sometimes they don't. Um, it depends on my ADHD and if
Yeah.
I'm hyper focused on the novel or if like it's woo.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I go through a lot of drafts, but the first draft is mostly just like I color barf on paper. Just get the draft out and then fix it after, because you can't fix nothing. Right? It's easier to fix something than nothing. And I will go through a lot of drafts, both in novels and picture books. And sometimes with picture books, like with Pockets Full of Sea Glass, I'll think on it for a long time before I actually write it. So that sometimes the drafts are in my head before I get them on paper.
Right. So you live with them for a little while and figure them out. And yeah, that's good.
And then once I get a character or the first sentence in the picture book, it usually comes out. And well, depending on the picture book, but with Pockets, it was like that. It was like, no, that's not a good sentence. Not. And as soon as I got the first sentence, the rest came out, and I really didn't. It took me about 20 minutes to write the whole thing.
Right.
And then I sent it to Acorn. But it was a lot of process before actually writing.
Yes. So, yeah. And sometimes those moments of magic happen, and it does seem instantaneous, but really when you think about it, it's something that you're living with. It's something that has been brewing, and all these little things, nuggets, so it, and I'm holding on to your book here too. You write prose, so like regular fiction format, but you also write novels in verse, and that is really cool. And you can tell when reading Pockets Full of Sea Glass, because it's really lyrical and has a poetic vibe to it. So when I looked you up and was looking at your stuff and saw the novel in verse, I was like, oh, okay, yes, of course. Yeah. So different worlds, but what would you say to someone who's wanting to maybe try novels in verse or longer works of poetry like that?
Novels in verse are all about emotion. Same with, any kind of verse is generally emotion. So if you're not really ready to dig into that, you have to in prose too. You have to put the emotion on the page. I edit as well, novels. And if the emotion's not there, I'm not going to read. I'm not going to want to follow the character, right?
Right.
So, you really have to bring the emotion with verse novels, and a lot of it's internal dialogue.
Yeah, it's all the self-talk, and it's the really big, the big stuff that the characters are grappling with. And then I did want to talk about one line in Sea Glass that made me think, oh, this woman is a poet. Some days worry wraps me up so tight in the darkness of what could happen. And I think that is really, truly what anxiety is the fear of, what could happen. And sometimes it's not just that something dreadful is going to happen. Sometimes it can be something good is going to happen, and that also causes a whole bunch of anxiety.
Nervous about that.
Yeah. So I loved this book. I could really relate to it. I'm sure kids will be able to relate to it. And for the illustration wise, I loved your incorporation of worry as it's a little bit of black smoke, kind of a little bit of blackness that's surrounding the character. And then, I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but it's just really a neat visual element throughout the book that clashes with the bright, beautiful sea glass. It's really nice. Yeah. So speaking of how you illustrated or created Pockets Full of Sea Glass and No More Plastic, behind you have... Yeah. Okay. So this is your diorama of Pockets Full of Sea Glass. Would you?
It's not the exact one, but very similar.
Okay.
But it's the exact character and the exact, because I keep them, so I have them. It's not exactly the way it is. And then I'm just gonna get a little closer. I wonder if I can just bring this over.
Yeah, the lighting really helps. Gosh, that looks neat.
So here's what I would do. Still see?
Yeah, it's perfect.
So depending on where the sun is, I'll light it up from behind, and then I have the camera here, and sometimes I light there, and then even behind, sometimes I have little lights that are like,
oh yeah, extra lights.
Little extra lights that can light up the scene. So I have lights like, you see that?
Yeah.
I just unplugged this. I'm not sure if it's gonna. So it'll light up just different areas if I wanted him lit down there.
Right.
But I would put it usually behind something or in front like this, depending on how I want the light to, the light of the day, right? Or if I needed a shadow, like the eagle shadow,
right?
I had glass over top and put the light over
neat.
top of it.
And it's really inventive. I don't know if you can tip down just a little bit so we can see. Yeah. So you've got bits of the ocean that you brought into your house. You've got sand. You've got some driftwood. You have, are the lupins pictures or art that you created?
Art that I created.
Okay, that's fantastic.
With no more plastic. Everything was recycled plastic. Everything, even the characters. He is paper and material though.
Okay.
So, or cardstock. I drew him on the iPad, and then I printed him off on cardstock, and then I cut him out, and then I did, because my printer's not very good, I had to paint him a little bit, and then I added material for clothes.
That is so neat.
So,
and then the ocean is
paper. It's just a plastic bag.
Plastic bag, yeah.
Yeah. So I use that a lot with no more plastic, because that's how I got the idea to use all plastic. So anything in no more plastic is plastic.
Right.
Even the characters were cut out of clear plastic and then painted. And it's all recycled. I got the plastic, a lot of it from the school that I worked at.
Yeah. That is so inventive. Thank you for showing us that.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. And it's really neat how when you take your photos, how that plastic in the background, that's just like a, poly or whatever, it's a bag basically, does look like the ocean. Like it looks like white caps and yeah.
Well, I painted the white caps on that one, but sometimes I don't. You don't have to, but I think there was a couple of scenes I actually just painted the bag.
Oh, okay, yes. But it looks great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the dog in this one too. It's cute.
Yeah.
So, we should talk awards because you've won a bunch. Tell us about some recent awards and some of your.
Well, the Journal of Anxious Izzy is up for the Silver Birch Express for this year.
That's with the Forest of Reading?
Yes. And then this one was the Honor Book last year, and it's up for the Rhode Island Book Award. I've got other awards I don't know if I've written a book that hasn't gotten an award.
That's a really good.
Of some kind.
That's a good claim to fame.
So it's I'm not sure. I don't think so. No, I've got awards for all of my books.
Yeah, that's great.
Some of them are big awards and some of them are small awards. So it's but I love the Children's Choice Awards because that's who I want to love my books, because that's who I write for.
Yeah.
Right?
You write for the kids.
I always say I won't turn down a Governor General, but I love the Children's Choice Awards.
Yeah, and Children's Choice, that says it all. If you can engage them and they want to read it and they're hungry for it, and then you've got a winning combination there. So, speaking about Children's Choice Awards and children choosing to read, you had difficulties reading when you were a kid, and you started reading in grade 4.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that, and maybe what was the first book that you actually really got into and read?
Okay. Growing up, it was really hard. I used to get called a lot of names and stuff, even by teachers. Teachers were meaner when we were younger.
Yeah.
Like I had a teacher in grade 2 that told me I'd never graduate if I didn't take my time. And in grade 1, I was put in the corner every time I wrote a letter backwards, or I'm sure there were other things, but I thought I was stupid because I couldn't, I hate that word, but because I couldn't, do what my friends were doing, and things, I didn't realize that my friends' letters weren't moving around on the page like mine were. So, by grade 3, I stopped raising my hand even if I knew the question or the answer. And in grade 4, my teacher put she put a mirror to the chalkboard, and she was saying, to the whole class. She didn't point me out like my other teachers had. And she said, well, try reading it. No one could. And then after class, I went to the teacher. Her name was Mrs. Mons. And I said, Mrs. Mons, this is how I see, And she said, I know, and I'm going to help you. But before that, when my teachers were getting upset about me writing the letters backwards, they wouldn't believe that's how I saw. Because back then, it wasn't well known. I said, well, this is how I see them. Like, write the way you see them, and this is how I see them. And I would be called a liar or whatever, right?
Thank goodness that education has evolved, Yeah, gee.
Well, that's why I like to go into these schools and as an EA and help now, because I know all the tricks. And I pick out, like, the kids, okay, this kid can't read. Or this kid, because I knew, I could memorize things. And I can't now because I'm old. I can't remember what I did yesterday. But as a kid, somebody would read me a passage. I'd say, hey, can you read this? And I think I have that actually in flipping that scene in this book. I'm not sure, it was at one time, but I'm not sure if it's still there. Because that's about dyslexia, a little girl with dyslexia. Anyway, so I would get my friends to read it, or my siblings might help me do my homework, or my friends would help me do my homework. So the teachers didn't really know I couldn't read.
Right. Grade 4, then your teacher was able to get you the help that you needed?
Yeah. She did things like she did pipe cleaner letters, and this is what I do with kids who are younger. Like, the teacher said, because a lot of times they just put the letter on the a piece of paper, and they say, well, I said, well, if they're not feeling it, they don't know which way it's going. And the teacher was like, it's a click, but if you can feel the way it's going, then you can train your eyes to know which way it is actually going.
Wow.
Right? It helps train your eyes.
So do they make the letters too, out of the pipe cleaners too? So they're physically making the letters? Yeah.
Yeah, or string, or, anything, so they can move their finger over the letter. And it helps to know which way the letter's going. But the letters are still mixing up, like smart. Dog could be God, or ODG or whatever, because the letters will dance. They dance around. It moves. It's like a party on the page that you're not invited to.
Wow. Yeah.
And it depends on your dyslexia too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's some days it's worse than others. And if someone sent me an email that's red lettering on black, it would screw me up for the whole day.
Okay. It's like an overload almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really depends on what's happening or how tired I am. And some other things that help are just different colors of plastic over top of the letters because it can ground them, or fonts. Mm-hmm. There's like this is written in a special font, right? That helps with dyslexia. So
that's excellent. So it's good resources that hopefully teachers are watching this, and we'll get some excellent tips, and parents of kids struggling with these issues. And speaking of that, I think I don't know if most of your books, but it sounds like a lot of your books are tapping into the big catchphrase of the moment, which is a good catchphrase to have, SEL, or social emotional learning books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the recent ones are, yes. Yeah. For sure. So
it's really good. So I think they should be on people's lists for their classroom libraries and school libraries. Just saying. Okay, so is there anything you would like to mention before we say our goodbyes?
No, I don't think there is. No. I think, well, there's, if a kid's watching this and they're struggling, just keep at it. Because you can do anything, and don't let people tell you that you can't do something. Because I was always told, like, you're never going to be an author if you can barely read a book, and you're never going to be an illustrator if you didn't go to art school, right? But I did both. You got to decide for yourself what you want and then just go for it.
Good advice, my friend. Very good advice.
That's for adults too, not just kids.
Yes. And you're never too old. If there's someone out there also who wants to be a writer or an illustrator, you just have to just decide you're going to dive in and just start getting some words on the page. And
yeah. And don't stop, because you're going to get rejections. You'll get rejections, and and it's work. Like, a lot of people think that writing for children is going to be easy, especially picture books. And, I did say that I wrote, Pockets Full of Sea Glass, but I thought about it for months before I actually put it down on paper, right? Mm-hmm.
And you do have a lot of experience with the words behind you. So
yes. Yeah. That helps.
Yeah.
You get better. I remember my first books, and they were horrible. And, I sent them out, and they didn't get published. And, I look at them now, and I said, I wouldn't have published them either. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are like the baby steps, though. You got to start somewhere, and then you just develop your skills. And
right. Yes. It's with anything, it's learning.
Thanks again for hanging out with me, Alma, and best of luck with your books. And I know there's probably more coming our way from you. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.